Hello, everybody. I hope my audio is coming through okay. It looks like I have levels on my end. Happy to be here, everyone. I'm really excited to be a part of this show. The Dracula Dossier campaign by Pelgrane's Press. Special thanks to Noah Lloyd for all their help this week in getting set up for this campaign. And full disclosure, this stream is sponsored by Pelgrane Press, and they have been phenomenal partners in working to bring this campaign to light. I like to start and talk about, when I think of my prep, the goals of what I'm trying to get out of this prep. And you can see them on the screen, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, for I am old and blind. That's actually not a joke. I'm blind in my left eye, and as I'm aging, my eyesight is deteriorating. But thankfully, we live in an age of accessibility, where I have a lot of tools from screen readers and magnification devices to read what's on my screen. So these are some ideas that I jotted down about what I want to get out of the prep. First and foremost, I am a player-centric game master, or in this system, it's referred to as a director, which I appreciate coming from a background in motion pictures and television, directing the campaign. So I want to introduce the characters to the audience. Since this is a performative play show, we are going to play a game in front of an audience. I want everyone that watches the show to get introduced to the various characters that my players have come up with for part of the game. We have 4 players for this show, and we will be having guest stars on occasion. And some of these guest stars are, we're in the process of lining them up, but as far as the players go, our players are Pro Restarter. Let me bring up the graphic. So this is the social graphic. This is actually Adobe Photoshop. We'll deselect and we'll zoom in. And you can look at these players under a microscope. First off, they're all wonderful people. We're all friends. We've played together before. We absolutely love this game. So Pro Restarter, I've played RPGs with for about 3 or 4 years. They are a British role player. They play a lot of different games online, a lot of different systems. They love diving deep into character and characterization. Pro and I have played in shows where we were villainous campaigns, and we were both playing heinous villains, and we love pushing the envelope. Likewise, we've also played campaigns where we were stalwart heroes. In this game, we are going to be playing agents, and we'll talk a little bit about what that means as we examine my prep and this goes on. Pro is going to be playing an ex-military type who has suffered substantial hearing loss, which I am especially sensitive to, having lost hearing due to injury. And we're really excited to see where this character, we were talking about perhaps they have served as a trainer in special forces where mercenaries would be needed. I'm going to touch the music down just a hair. Speaking of my sensitive hearing. My other friend, Jess Meyer, Burst of Hope from the internet. Jess is actually one of the first people to introduce the game system to me, Nice Black Agents. And Jess and I have played a variety of game systems together. We have played with both Sharung and Pro together, but we have not mutually played with Lily. And Jess is a deep investigator personality type. Jess and I played a different system that involved all sorts of codes. It involved breaking different ciphers and number systems in order to unlock story content in the game. So a campaign like this is going to put a great investigative burden and cognitive load on the players. And so Jess is the type of player that's going to help perform some of that some of that lift to get everyone motivated to help uncover and solve these mysteries. Yes, chat. Jess is just very good human, very good player. Has helped me out on numerous projects over the years. Lily is another performative player. They are actually a volunteer game master and game facilitator for a variety of conventions. They have been doing a lot with social media marketing in the game space, as well as performing in actual plays on Twitch. Lily has an exceptional keen eye for detail, as well as really enjoys the improvisational aspect of gaming. And Lily and I have talked about how this sort of campaign really plays into our imagination and storytelling abilities, specifically as we extract details from the dossier document and implement it into play. And Sharong is a phenomenal friend. Sharong is an award-winning independent game designer. We have played in and produced multiple actual play series together. Sharong is the first person who approached me about running this game on stream and looked at my background as someone who has worked in investigation as well as the game industry and film as a storyteller. And we talked about a timeline to put this game together. Now, originally, we were just going to play some what I might call vanilla, off-the-shelf Night's Black Agents. But as I began to dig into the source material, I came across a document, or rather a campaign, called the Dracula Dossier, which is a collection of books. Let me scroll up. There's even more to this as we look at the actual Dracula Dossier document. But I just fell in love with the idea of taking all of this information, all of these elements, all of these assets, all of these fictional pieces, and looking at how I might weave them together into a highly collaborative. You are allowed to be here, Jess. We were just saying all sorts of nice things about you. But there will be spoilers as this is a prep stream. However, I trust you to play double agent and actually work for Operation Edom. Love you to death. Thank you for coming by the show. Appreciate it. So let's talk a bit about, and I'm going to pull up another document, what we are getting into. And we will talk a little bit about, here we go, Dracula. There it is, for all of you to see. So, Night's Black Agents is a vampire spy thriller game by Kenneth Haidt. And it is a game which allows us to adjust dials to change the game mode to tell very different story types. It is powered by the Gumshoe system. In the game, players have the ability to portray the roles of highly competent, highly trained, investigative types that have a very particular set of skills. And I'm going to talk about how I frame the game for my players. And I'm going to flip over to a document I made for a one-shot. So I've run Night's Black Agents for players who have never played it before. And this is how I present the game to my players if they haven't played before, using the available material that the book gives us. And here's what we frame it as. So I always start with what you are and what you do in the game. So you live in the shadows. Maybe you were a spy before you got burned or turned or just plain burned out. A criminal, perhaps. a mercenary, or maybe you once tried to bring secrets into the light. You might have been a journalist once, or a researcher who delved a little too deep. You know too much to go back into the daylight. You know about the vampires. You know there are inhuman monsters pulling humanity's strings from the darkness. You know they feed on the innocent. You know they're monsters, and they have to be stopped. So, with a few others like you that you can trust, you mount your own shadow war against the undead. Then I explained to the characters what they're playing. Now, this was for a one-shot, so I had pre-gens, and I had a shared Google Sheet a shared Google Sheet to keep track of our characters. Just would make an excellent quadruple agent. That is to chat. So, Night's Black Agents player characters are called agents. They're burned spies, ex-criminals, former special forces, and the like. They have, shall we say, a very particular set of skills. They're not part of any organization or agency. In this game, you're on your own against the vampires. They are, however, very good at what they do. So let's go back to our goals and talk about how, since for a number of our players, this is going to be their very first time playing in the game. So we go back to our goals. I want the players to be able to explore the mechanics of the system. I will probably produce to them a rule that in our first scene of the game, whatever points they spend for their abilities, those are going to refresh at the end of the scene. Because I want them to look at their character sheets, and I want them to push all the buttons on the character sheet, so to speak. I want them to use their abilities, and I want them to feel like it is okay for them to take risks, and then refresh and get those abilities back, just so they can understand what they can do. So that's another goal as well. I want them to explore the mechanics of the system. My third goal for my players is to sort of establish table etiquette and a cadence. Having worked as a game designer, specifically designing games for streamed performative play, finding that rhythm of players introducing and interjecting their voice into the fiction, I think is very important. And making sure that there is space for every player, and making sure that every player is heard and that their needs are met. As well as making sure that players feel comfortable addressing these issues with each other in a very non-threatening, communicative way where we simply say what we need. A good example of this is as we look back at our players, Sharong and I were playing a game on stream, and Sharong messaged myself and the Game Master privately and said, can we get through this scene because we've spent a lot of time on it, and I want to make sure that I have time to do things in the game as well. And we agreed to it. We made sure that there was space because we were kind of caught in a loop, and we wanted to make sure that we had time to put on a good show, which goes back to some of the other goals. Let's talk about my tonal goals. My tonal goals is I want this to feel like a good movie. Originally, I just said feel like a movie. But there's all kinds of movies. I want people to kind of lean in. In fact, this is how I would change it. I want the audience to lean in and watch a little closer. So, cinema is built on the idea of what we call lean-forward moments. A lean-forward moment is when we use a mechanism. In cinema, it would be a cinematic mechanism. In games, it would be a game mechanism. And the audience, they lean in. There's movies where they use jump cuts, and you lean in as lightning strikes, as the main character turns their head around, lightning strikes it as a jump cut, and they lean in. And that's what I want. I want the audience to lean in and watch a little closer. I want my players to feel like they are part of the story, not simply playing a game. I want them... there was a good quote by my friend James Introcaso in his article, James versus Dracula. He said, as I was reading the dossier, I felt like Dracula might be spying on me. And it was a great feeling, although a little terrifying at times. Lastly, I want the audience to be delighted. That's sort of the tone I want. I like to put on shows that are fun to watch. Hey, Happy Capster, good to see you in chat. So, the way we delight the audience is by being good sports, by not overburdening burdening them with the mechanical logistics of the game, by understanding the rules so that we can play efficiently, and by making sure that our technical perfection is just right. So if I'm playing music now, and the music is befitting the tone and theme of the stream, likewise I would want to make sure my music is fitting to the story. Likewise, I want to make sure that my characters look very good while they're playing the game. I don't want to bury the characters. And also, one of the ways you can delight the audience is by helping the players to have fun. That always grips the audience and brings them in closer. Most of those shows I produce are designed to delight the audience. Now let's talk about some of the campaign goals for this first session. One is I want the players to get the damn dossier. Well, let's go back to the Google document. Oh, thank you so much for the compliments on the opening video. I created that. I'm a full-time artist as part of my day job, and I love creating things for games. And that's really what this campaign is. As I look at this, I'm going to talk about some of the components. So there's the Director's Handbook, which is full of information to help facilitate play, from organizations to characters, towards the integration of thematic elements, as well as a large overarching story. That is all part of the Dossier Handbook. There is a field manual if you are playing part of the Operation Edom, which is sort of the counter-organization to our characters. In this campaign, we would take these documents and we would use them as clues that we can disseminate to the players at appropriate time. And the book contains good advice for establishing the size of the organization, talking about how they integrate with the vampires. Hey, good to see you. Good to see you, chat. For those of you watching this on demand, we have a live chat, and they are full of some of my favorite people. So the Edom Field Manual is good for introducing solid clues, and it has good guidance for me as someone running the game, how to introduce it, how to future-proof it, so on and so forth. The Hawkins papers are another set of clues, handouts, etc. that I can give out. What I like about all these books is it tells you how to use it. For example, you might use these clues as a reward, or if we need to provide a plot twist, or if we need to provide insider knowledge, etc. We can take the material from this supplement, which is a variety of maps and aged letters. I'm going to fast forward to get through this. Some of these are handwritten, a little harder to read. Some of them are mission briefings back from Dracula's day, so on and so forth. But these are all props we can hand out. If you've played other games that are prop-heavy, such as Invisible Sun or other games, Dungeons and Dragons, you know, there's a lot of dungeon masters that make props and bring them into the game. With a game like Night's Black Agents, having these letters, news articles, maps, photos, IDs, etc. that you can hand out to the players or present to the audience, it is very empowering and adds an extra layer of immersion to the story. Now, the Edom Files is a series of adventures. One, you can go through the various ages over the past, 150 years or so, engaging with the various Dracula stories. But it also contains what I would call the crew or crux of my first session, which is going to be a adventure that I often run as a one-shot called the Harker Intrusion, which was available for Free RPG Day in 2015. So let's see if we can get to the Harker Intrusion. Lastly, good to have you back, Dan. Lastly, sort of the centerpiece of this campaign, its namesake, is the Dracula Unredacted book. What this is it is a first edition copy of Dracula by Bram Stoker. And all through the book are annotations. The annotations are in different color. We're going to zoom in so you can actually see this. This prop is going to be handed to my players. These notes were written by different secret agent organizations. And it is full of clues, leads, and guidance as to how to get to the heart of the conspiracy. Yes, part of playing in this campaign is asking the players to read a copy of Dracula. A sample of how a player's notes might look after they engage with this. Writer Date for Hopkins. This is someone who played the campaign in 2015. They were reading the book, and these are all story leads that they are willing to chase down while reading the Dracula Dossier. Each one of these, in and of itself, could become an adventure hook. And this is 41 pages of notes that a single player compiled. My recommendation for my players is to use a shared document and color code their leads, and to take these leads and use them to help guide and direct their campaign. We're not here yet, though. For my players, have not yet uncovered the Dracula. Yeah, replayability. Let's talk about that as well. As you look at sort of the personas inside the Dracula Dossier as well, we're going to jump to some of these characters. When we click on these characters, and we will just go to Parker. Let's find him. So, 2011. Oh, we'll just open any of these. Like, we'll go to Cushing. So as I zoom in on this, you get Cushing's name, possible roles, gives them a couple different roles, and then says how you might use them if they're an asset, or if they're a minion of Dracula. Alternate names that you can give the character if you want to portray them differently. Different descriptions that you can give them. Maybe they're in their mid-20s, maybe they're in their mid-40s. They could be a chicken farmer. They could be, they could have short hair. They could have long hair. And they do a very good job of describing them, as well as their defining quirks. And it also tells you where they show up in the dossier through the different documents. So even if you play with a character one way, you can set the dials or change the appearance, the theming of each and every single one of these characters, which there are many throughout. It's phenomenal. So that's a note on replayability. One, you can find a million leads. Two, you can switch them up however you want. Now, when we talk about prep, though, that is a huge burden to put on an individual. We have a lot of content now. We start looking at page counts. 490, 372, 114, 89, 194. Not to mention an entire game to run itself. So here are some things that I do to overcome my challenges. Let's talk about my prep. This is almost like a checklist. We're going to insert a page break. So first, rules mastery. Everything we need for the first session. Everything we need is available is available in the free RPG Day book. So in 2015, a 13th Age and Night's Black Agent one-shot designed for fast pace to play quickly and introduce people to the system came out. So for the rules, there is a simple handout that can be introduced. What I love about Pelgrane is they hyperlink these PDFs. I can use essentially the intro to this and hand it to my players to explain all the basic rules and give them a quick guide to explain how some of the abilities work, and give them kind of a cheat sheet. And the game is very simple. Investigative abilities are automatic. General abilities require a roll. You have to beat a number between 2 and 8 usually. You can spend points to do that. So, as we look back at my rules mastery, create a handout. For players, they all can see. So now that's in a PDF. It doesn't help if the PDF is on my side. It would help if I placed this on a virtual tabletop like a Roll20, and had the key points to make sure they know how it works. I actually think I have another cheat sheet as well, right here, that gives the generic rules. So these are generic rules. This is a lot simpler and easier to read. It's larger text. Very easy for the players to understand the basic mechanics of the game. Part of that we will learn through play as well. And something else I did in advance is run a sample one-shot off-stream with friends. So I ran the game for some friends of mine to sort of get a feel for the flow and see where I needed help with. And what did I learn? I need to review chase rules. So what I did when I ran my one-shot, I prepped. I found a sticking point, which is on my rules. The next goal is understand the scope of the session. So the Harker intrusion, and I'm using the version from the Edom files. Essentially, we need to establish a couple different things. So there's this idea of the spine, which is the thriller spine. Let's see what this says. Right from the book. In the Marrakesh extraction, the Ancients tangle with an Edom hit squad and its supernatural assets. After rescuing Lou, so there's a character, Olivia Lou, that they are attempting to rescue, they can follow up on her story about secret graves in Romania, detour to Gibraltar to learn more about Edom, or head to London to meet up with Harker and obtain the dossier in the London connection. So let's make a list of locations. Marrakesh, Romania, Gibraltar, and London. They tell this to you here, so I'm pulling these out. So there are 4 almost mini stories here in the Harker intrusion, and here are some things that I did. I read through the adventure And then I created a small map in my head of these are the locations. They all connect. So we're at Marrakesh. The goal here, rescue Lou. For Romania, visit, I'm going to call them vampire graves. Spoilers. Gibraltar, backstory for Operation Edom. London, get the dossier. These are kind of the goals that they'll achieve at each place. And the way I learned this, and we can sort of glance through it together, and I'll show you some of the things that I see. So I move in. I will go back to the Edom files, because this is where it is. The nice thing about this adventure is it runs very fast. Let me turn off Steam. So, as you read this, it very clearly sets up the framework for the adventure. And I say it sets it up very clearly because I've read through it. In my document to my players, as we come back to my one-shot, you remember I talked about, you were once spies, etc. I then tell them exactly what they have to do. This is a royalty-free picture that I licensed on Shutterstock. So I actually got a photograph of Marrakesh, the market that my players would be at. I want them to see it. I do this as part of my prep. Now, the reason I'm licensing is I'm playing a public performative game, and I want to have the rights to use photos and artwork, such as this music. This music is property of Pelgrane Press, if you'd like to pick up a copy. I'm going to drop a link in chat. But I asked them for permission if I could play the music on stream. The album is Dust and Mirrors. There are some phenomenal composers on it. Hashtag sponsored, because they are paying for production. I write the hook to my players, and this is exactly what I wrote. We kick off in the middle of the action. There's an American freelance journalist, Olivia Liu, who's on the run from bad guys. You're going to get to her first, and she's in Marrakesh. My players will know immediately when they go to Marrakesh that they have to get to Olivia Liu. Now, how they do that, there's a bunch of different ways. They all have custom abilities. They all have different approaches to investigation. Typically what I do, as part of my prep, is I have a note to myself to ask my players a couple different ways that they might decide to approach this problem, and how they might use their abilities or things they might have done in advance. If they're going to bring weapons with them, I let them know there might be a role. I also let them know you can buy weapons in Marrakesh. If they've made a character that's something like a daredevil stunt driver, and they're worried about, they're like, we're going to have to find a way to force cars into this game. Not necessarily, it takes place in modern days, so there's cars everywhere. They will have access to do all of their cool things. The next thing I do is I write down some assumptions. So this assumption is going to be that all my players know and trust each other to one degree or the other. For this session, though, instead of the one-shot, let's add a beat to this location. Beat. Scene to get to see the characters and learn their relationships. I like to keep this very vague and improvisational, and sort of when I play some other games, I might ask a character, tell me about your morning routine. How does your character get ready in the morning? Just to kind of help them reset their brains and get into character. They go, my morning routine. All right, let me think about that. I get up and I shave. Okay, you shave. Clean shave? Are there any patterns? And they start talking about how they groom their facial hair if they have it. Or they might talk about what they make for breakfast, or if they skip breakfast, or how they always wake up late. But what I want to do is I want to talk to my players in advance to start thinking about the relationships and how this might come into play. For my game, since it's online and we are all social distancing, as this takes place during the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, when we recorded this video, we have a Discord server, and we're beginning to talk about our character connections and how and why we might know each other. When I ran this for my one-shot, where we didn't have the luxury of all that prep, I asked them, I said, okay, which of you already, only 2 of you already know each other. The rest of you are trying to impress the others. So we can talk about how we can build these relationships. The real key to this scene, though, is rescue Lou. Double check. That music's still playing. It was just very low. I took here, this is a separate document, and the reason I set it up as a separate document is I wanted clean pages of each location. So I simply set up, this is Marrakesh. This is Gibraltar. Why are we going there? And I tried to lean into the key idea of what's going to happen there. In Marrakesh, we need to rescue the American journalist. We need to have an opening scene. And there's a list of things that could happen here. And it all depends on where my players are going to go. Now, as part of my prep, I think of the different ways that they can get information. So then, before they can rescue her, they need to find out where Lou is. So as you read the adventure, and there, with the Dracula Dossier, there's a bunch of different lead-ins. We'll look back at this book. As we look back at this book, there are scenario spines. So there's 1, 2, 3 different introductions into the campaign in that book, as well as introductions in Edom Files, as well as a complete separate campaign. So there's a total of 5 different entrances into this campaign, and I have adopted one. What I have done is I have read through the book, and these are some of my learnings as part of my prep. So, and there's different ways that they can find out where she is. So they can steal a radio, steal a bad guy's radio, ask hotel staff, survey the city. The next thing that I need to do is establish the threat of Edom. Now, this game is the antithesis of a railroad. It's not like what I would call a dungeon design scenario. So in dungeons, you have rooms, and each room connects to another one physically, and there are planned encounters in each room. A game like this seems to be maps of ideas that interconnect. And a lot of the advice I have on this game is your players are often going to introduce the best idea. So I'm going to add another beat, though. These are things that need to happen. So they need to find out where she is. And kind of going along with that is I need to establish the threat of Edom. I'll put bad guys. And there's a couple different ways. So there's local jerks is what I'm going to call them. I'm calling them jerks because they try to kill the player characters. The kill squad. Special Operatives. And there's also, as we go back to the Edom files, Harkness. I'm going to grab this artwork. There she is. Ah, I'm sorry I'm coming in and out on audio. I'm not dropping any frames. Ta-da! Alright. So, how this happens and when, we know we're probably going to start, and we know that the characters need to find out where Lou is. What might not happen in order, though, is this beat of establishing the threat of Edom and the bad guys. So, in the few times that I've run Night's Black Agents, and I've run this scenario, the local jerks are those who try to kill the characters. So, yes. There's also a large force that's trying to box in Lou. And essentially it's going to be a chase. So, establish the threat. And then let's beat thriller chase. And then we get to rescue Lou. So and then it's going to be an exit. So yeah, the street toughs, some of them are trained in martial arts, some of them are a bit doofy, some of them are, the kill squad. They're very, very dangerous. There are a few things that we need to account for, though. Another goal that I'm going to list for my character or players up here are in the rules of the world. And here's why I'm adding that. Now, if my players show up and they go to a hotel and they encounter these local jerks and they get into a fight with them and they murder them, it's going to draw a lot of heat. This concept in the game of how much pressure is being put on the characters, it will draw a lot of heat. And they need to understand and be encouraged to be innovative in their combats. For example, they should be encouraged to take hold of blankets or tapestries or sheets and wrap up the bad guys in them and tie them up and restrain them, incapacitate them. Cold-blooded murder will attract the attentions of not just Edom, but the local law enforcement. So they just need to be aware of that. Likewise, they need to understand that the special operatives are influenced by the supernatural. Something I noticed here is that Harkness had a syringe of Seaward serum given to him. And so as we look at this, it's on page 51. So let's... Aha! It's important to, be aware of what this might be. And we're going to attempt something fancy in my prep document. Oh, come on. Where we're going to create a snip. We're going to copy this snip. Now, this is just for personal use. We're going to shrink this down. I can change its size. Just so I have quick access to it. Sometimes it helps make handouts. Sometimes, you know, I want to keep a card. This is something that one of the NPCs in the game, who's kind of orchestrating the strings on the ground. And I will make a note, too, about this prep. If it seems very rambly, that is what I learned. Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern, you can watch episode 1 of Night's Black Agent. So if you're on the West Coast, that would be 2 p.m. And it'll be a lot of fun. Now, one of the reasons I'm highlighting kind of the key things that'll happen is adios, my friend. There's a lot that can happen, and you know, your players can improvise any sort of thing. The books, the written adventures, give you good ideas of what you want to do. There was a help that I read, though, that was very helpful for Night's Black Agents, and let me pop over to it. There is a sort of some advice. I want to say advice for writing, advice for adventures. Let me see if I can find it really quick as a cheat sheet. How to design an adventure. This is available on the Pelgrane site. I was very, very nervous to run this game, even for my friends. And part of the reason of me doing these series and showing my prep is to let you know it can be done. I'm just like everybody else that prepares games and gets into this. So I found this document on the Pelgrane site, and it has some guidance for doing an adventure. So have the core of a cool idea. The idea here is the characters are going to get the Dracula Dossier. 2, we're going to develop the idea. They're going to go to Marrakesh, and they're going to end up in Gibraltar. They could end up in Romania. They could end up in London. Once they end up in London, which is the source of a mysterious email that they received, they are going to receive the Dracula Dossier. But I don't want to railroad them to London. I want them to come up with the idea. They're going to get core clues that lead them there. The next thing is involve the PCs and consider the clues. So the flow is narrow, wide, narrow. So we start very focused in Marrakesh. Then we could go anywhere, and then we're going to narrow in on that dossier. Follow the logic through. So as we find these clues, the clues should connect. If an individual in London sent the email and the contact with Lou was in London, and they devise that the person that contacted them and put them on this job to rescue Lou is the same individual, then they've put 2 and 2 together and they'll end up there. The number of times I've run this, some people end up straight in London right away. Allow them to be clever. They're going to do really cool things because they are, as we talked about, highly competent, highly trained agents. They have a lot of abilities. And aim for a big finale. So the takeaway is make a cool bad guy, cool plot, cool henchman, set the players on the right trail. Anything they do to follow the trail, if reasonable, will get more information. And then give them information consistently. So this right here at the bottom, I was terrified to run the game. And just that takeaway where it was like, hey, cool bad guy, cool plot and henchman, players on the right trail, and then just give them information and see where they go. When we talk about that tone of the game, when the last group I ran this for ended up encountering Harker in London, they were just flabbergasted. You know, they were highly impressed by the appearance of Harker. They got to him, and he didn't live very long. Like, they realized that's life is fleeting, and he ended up, it ended up not turning well as the vampire agents did him in. The supernatural did him in. So, back to this sort of document. The correct document, not the wrong document. Some things that can happen in Gibraltar. So in Marrakesh, we're going to see the characters. We're going to find Lou. We're going to learn that there's bad guys here. There's going to be a big chase. And then we're going to exit out of the scene to someplace. Then we could end up in Romania. We could end up in Gibraltar. Or we could end up in London. And then let's just go down this list and figure out the things that could happen there. We know the key thing is to deal with these vampire graves. Let's take a look to see what this says. We're going to use the Edom Files version. These are the special operatives. They're terrifying. But they have powerful abilities that can be used to punish and terrify the players. So right here, it tells you, you can end up in Romania, you can end up in London, you can end up in Gibraltar. So let's take a look. So it's an alternate scene. So this I've already pasted in my document. This is sort of the framework for it. So there's some investigation they do in the area. As they're going to obtain clues to drive the adventure forward. So, some things they can learn is that whoever's here is in a hurry. There's characters that could be involved, and it points us back to page 292 of the Dracula Dossier, or the Director's Handbook. And more information. So, let's write down questions for us to answer. Who is directing them to dig so quickly? I'm going to write down the skill. I apologize for the terrible formatting on this document. So if each of those leads... I like to figure out questions to answer, and one of the reasons I do that is I think when we play these games, particularly investigative RPGs, knowing why we're playing, and we're playing to answer a question. So what do we want to find out by playing this game? We want to know why they're digging so quickly. Who is financing it is the next one. Counting. And you notice, even though it's alphabetical, these skills are very different. Archaeology is quite different than accounting. You know, Indiana Jones versus... You dumped your stock of vampire graves. Good to see you, Improv GM. Let's see if there's any others of these. What type of defenses do they have? Military science. And then let's sort of talk about how these might frame as scenes. So these are investigative ideas. You know, these are different. One of the special agents from Morocco, the special operatives, might be here. Let's add that note. We have looped our soundtrack. Some of the next things we need to figure out is... And I want to talk about, too, how some of this prep... it might seem like, okay, this is a lot, we're taking a lot of notes. Mostly I'm... The reason I'm writing things down is... I want to be able to have touchstones in my memory to draw upon when my players make decisions that maybe I didn't anticipate. The last time I played this game, they went from Morocco to London. In like 3 hours, that was that. They didn't touch Gibraltar. They could go, if they weren't playing a one-shot, they could end up there one day. So... let's figure out what's going on. So, what it's talking about down here is exactly why there's an excavation. So, they gouged a black wound in the hillside. They're using earth-moving equipment and men with shovels to dig down further. And what they're doing here is... they have armed guards. We already read this. This is redundant. The Romanian blood sorceress. Agents can sneak in. And our major out, or one of the major outs, is that we just learned here is, let's write this down. Capturing and interrogating an Edom operative will reveal that whoever the dig site to Lou Parker doomed. Most of the reasons I write this down is just to get it in my head. And it helps to have some cheat sheets that I can draw upon. So let's try to get these cleaner on their own pages. Whoop. Gonna bold this. figure out who's in charge of the operation, who's financing it, what kind of defenses they have, answer those questions, and we're able to do it. And we know that we have our out. So while that might have seemed like a lot, it's like, well, we know that there's an archaeologist from Edom. We have a character card that we can pull that out. The book itself tells us what page number we can get some of that information from. Figuring out that, there's a cutout corporation, from petroleum company executive is maybe in charge. That's a lead we can chase down. Then figuring out that, okay, this looks like local thugs, but also there's the blood sorceress we failed to kill earlier. It's her again. Snakes. Why'd it have to be snakes? And if we get in and we capture and interrogate someone, we can learn that our man in London is doomed. So if we end up there, very similarly to the first one, we have some beats. We're going to investigate the area. We're going to have to learn about it. We're going to show up at the dig site. We're going to spy on it. We're going to have to sneak in. And then we're going to have to get more information, figure out what's going on. But let's see. At a suitably dramatic moment, while the team is observing the dig site, or sneaking around, the excavation breaks into an underground chamber containing a metal coffin. The coffin contains a slumbering vampire. The Edom officer's mission here is to reawaken the vampire once they've taken proper precautions. The sorceress demands they open it immediately, but is argued down by the Edom archaeologist. They'll wait until the following dawn before bringing down the blood from the storage container to revivify whatever's in the coffin. This gives the agents a brief window to take out the monster before it's awoken. Possible options. The world is a vampire. So let's see this. So let's answer some of our own questions. So let's look at 292 and 293 in the Director's Handbook. So let's go to boom. There's the archaeologist. So this is going to be our NPC. Hi, Arberlin. Good to see you. It's either going to be someone from the Intrusives, or it's going to be Brooks Galbraith. So we're going to copy this picture over. And then I'm just going to put a couple of notes. So, like, there's a whole lot here. So, mid-50s, tweed jacket, had a sleek iron gray hair, dignified, not to say arrogant expression. And I can figure out kind of his framing. I'm going to put that he's Alright, so if I was to cast this guy, I'm gonna go in a different direction. If you were to cast, so this is a question for chat. If you were to cast someone from a movie, I'm kind of leaning towards like a bring him over, like a Josh Holloway from Lost type, like, have someone with a little bit of an edge, someone in good shape. There's also there's a Scottish archaeologist you know, that we might want to pull in. Get ourselves a good actor. But that said, we'll say early 40s, large frame, strong jaw, denim. Some of this we're getting from this because it's bringing some things to my mind. I want this archaeologist to be portrayed because they're gonna meet Harker later, and what I don't want is like Harker, heavy Harker, right? I want this large frame. You know, we'll zoom in so you can see. Blonde and sunburned. I love that. Let's get that. Denim jeans. This is a hunk. This is like the Chris Pratt of of archaeologists. Someone a little older. This is like the Brad Pitt. Except Brad Pitt's not hulking, so get a big guy. Like Jan Blachowicz. That's who I'm thinking, so we have a picture of Jan Blachowicz. Brad Pitt and Troy, that's what I'm thinking is like you know, maybe an MMA fighter like Jan Blachowicz. Like someone strong, you know. He's Lara Croft. But Jan Blachowicz is a Polish mixed martial artist. We'll delete that as it's a copyrighted photo that I don't have the rights to. But you know, another actor. Like this is another Lost actor, but having someone like Naveen Andrews, right? Like you know, Saeed from Lost, you know, a very powerful individual, strong character, a lot of presence in gravitas. So I'm gonna leave a note like Jan Blachowicz. You know, a Stipe Miocic. The reason I'm going with someone, they're already in the Eastern Bloc, so blonde, sunburned, so just fair-skinned. Let's look at the financing. And this is actually the fun part because we can add some details here. And my players may or may not end up there yet, but let's double check these files. And it's got to be the petroleum executive. He looks a bit like Idris Elba. Let's see if we can get there. This guy, Martin Creasy, American Wildcard, Geological Info Dump. That's going to be our Idris Elba. I say that. Idris Elba, it's another fighter. He's had professional Muay Thai fights. For a fellow Yank in Dracula land. Luther's a very good show. So different ways he can look. Yeah. They do a very good job with names in this one. I think I'm gonna give the quirk, you know, it's gonna be unflinching. Mid-50s. Looks. He's been vacationing in Maine. So let's take a look at Gibraltar, which is actually out of the locations that I've looked at, I have the least information on. So this was a signals intelligent network station where there's an EDM. There was an EDM outpost here, I believe. Let's look at some of the text here. So some of the conspiracy agents. There's conspiracy agents, the bad guys that we talked about. Conspiracy agents in Morocco came from Gibraltar. So this is an optional scene, and it's going to provide extra content. So if something gets cut from the session, it'll probably be this, because it's going to need to... there's going to be a lure. Excuse me, I'm untangling my legs. So... let's see. There's a satellite station. Hey, how's it going, Klaus White? Good to see you. We're doing a little bit of RPG prep tonight. So let's add some notes here. So Gibraltar is going to require find the satellite station. And then let's see what's there. Because this I'm less familiar with. Find and break in, it becomes so find and infiltrate the satellite station. So they get in. They learn that it was recently shut down. So and they're going to learn more about there's going to be data on boxes, special biological assets, jacks, and targets. There's going to be signs that they're working with vampires. So I'm going to add a note to All signs point to the vampire conspiracy. Introduce the concept of Operation Edom. And then there's some alternate chord clues here, so... we're going to learn... Eat 'em! Vampires. Now, so we're going to essentially we're going to end up... That is the wrong one. There we go. Learn about Romanian graves. Learn we are being tracked down. And tell our source in London. The Bloodsucker Prize. That's very good. A Muncie girl. Go Eagles! Sorry, Hudsucker Proxy reference in chat. You gotta give it respect. Not counting the mezzanine. What a good film. A Coen Brothers film, I believe. But, tell our source in London. Something we need to talk about is putting a bow on this, because I haven't talked much about the prep other than, oh, hey, I'm using this adventure. So something else here. So... we got to learn how we got the email from Harker and who got it, and it's encrypted, and if anyone wants to use any skills on it. So you can see that we've already had 2 outs point to Harker. We've actually had 3 outs point to Harker, so... Lou points to Harker, Romania points to Harker, and Edom points to Harker. We're all going to end up there at some point. A D4 roll. Maybe. One of our players is far more likely to get it. In fact, as we bring up our Photoshop, Jess's character, most likely. But yeah, I think rolling dice would be good, so we'll do that now. I got a 4. Sharong will receive it. So let's look at And for those of you just joining us, we are prepping the Dracula Dossier. Drop a link in chat. You can check it out. It's a wonderful collection. Put together by Kenneth Haidt for Pelgrane Press's game, Night's Black Agents, which is an investigative vampire spy thriller game, which we are running on WebDM channel on Saturdays, with me doing prep streams on Thursdays. So, let me see if I can pull up quickly our character sheets for the game. I almost pulled up my word count for my game design work. That would be terrifying, wouldn't it? So, we'll bring this over. The characters are Daquan, Jisoo, Antal Kuri, and T. And I'll tell you a little bit about all of them. So T is actually our expert in occult and vampirology, who was on the social scene around Asia. T is played by Lily Sparks from Twitter and other shows. And T, her parents were government operatives, and she ended up involved with various different mafiosos, etc., through the club scene. And noticed that the club scene was actually recruiting people into the vampire conspiracy, and managed to escape that life. Antal was a wet worker and a cleaner, an individual who performed assassinations. And according to this role, they studied at Oxford, and this is Sharung's character, and Sharung will end up essentially receiving the email and being the first person to get it. Jess is playing the hacker, essentially. They will be the master infiltrator and going all in on various electronic surveillances and counter cryptography and things like that to figure out what all is cracking on the digital side. And also, we mentioned earlier, Pro will be playing the former military, former mercenary, former special force individual Daquan. And probably 2 or 3 weeks into the campaign, you'll get to see our character art. All the art was commissioned by Jabari Weathers for our characters. And we're very excited for that. So it looks like Sharung will receive it. So let's check out, there's one last thing here. If the Jack survives Morocco, let's get back over to the right one. No escape. If the Jack from Marrakesh is still alive, and the Jack is sort of the equivalent of a Renfield. A Renfield is a human servant, human operative of vampires, except in this case you are working for Edom. These Jacks work for the agency, and he will show up at Gibraltar if he lives. So if we need to do a dramatic scene, remember this is a thriller game. So lastly, let's talk about London. And London is relatively simple. When I've... Hey. Let's go to the Edom files. So we're going to scroll down and go to the London. So you see the lead-in is very simple. Who is the mysterious source in London? Call him Harker. It doesn't matter if he's actually a descendant, legacy, in Night's Black Agents jargon, of the original Jonathan and Mina Harker, or he's just using a famous name as a nom de guerre. It doesn't matter, because he's going to die very soon. So... here are the steps in London. They need to make contact with Harker, discern the direness of the situation, watch Harker die, Escape with the dossier. So, the way this goes is Harker will be at a church. And it's important to note that each of these locations have sub-locations. Let's write them down for you. So, London. Airport. Hideouts. And church. Gibraltar. Secret satellite station. These are the real key, like, set pieces. Then Romania is an excavation site, monastery. And then in Marrakesh, there's going to be airport, hotel, markets, and there's a location called, like, I'm going to say Jima El Fana. Jama Al Fana. Any hotels, hostels, etc. Let me double check where, and so what I'm probably going to do is clean up my notes and place them in each location. This is very good to get, this is beautiful artwork. That all this is licensed. I licensed through Shutterstock. Let's double check, though. When you have the conversation with Olivia Liu, where that takes place, more or less. Ah, the Mala. I need to add that as a location. Previous. Which is the old Jewish quarter. And there is also, important to note, a map. The Riyadh Rouge is the hotel. Darcy Saeed. Hospital Riyadh Al. Apologies for any pronunciations. The old cemetery. It's important to note, too, which places, holy sites, etc., places vampires might not go. So we're actually going to drop this map into there to get an idea. If anything, to get this idea for scale. So we've written down a couple of our locations. The next thing that we want to figure out here is from the Edom Kill Squad. So this is a lot, and we've gone through, when you look at this, 1, 2, 3 different source books. And we've written about 6 pages of notes. Yes, it's large text, but it's still a lot. This all seems like a lot, but let's start deducting it. most of what we've done is tonight we've talked about our goals. We want to introduce our characters to the audience. We want it to feel like a movie. We want to make sure scenes move fluidly. Right now, if you ask me, and we will switch, so I'm not cheating. And this is silly and childish of me to do, but I know the adventure starts in Marrakesh, and my players are going to track down Olivia Liu. I know that she's in the Mallah, which is the Jewish quarter, and there's a lot of different ways they can get there. They can go to a hotel and find clues that she'll be there. They can steal radios from secret agents, and those secret agents might have special abilities that make them tougher to defeat. There's going to be 2 operatives that show up. These are the equivalent of the Saiyans in Dragon Ball Z. There's the Blood Sorceress and the Jack, and they're both very powerful. They're exceptionally strong. And they will go after our party and attempt to kill them. The goal in Marrakesh is for my players to get to the journalist, Olivia, and rescue her and find out what she knows. We're being tested. That's why we need to find her. Someone sent us an email. We have to find Olivia. We know she's in Morocco. We've got to get to her and save her before the bad guys do. She's going to send us to either Gibraltar, Romania, or London. The goal in Gibraltar is to expand what we know about Operation Edom. While we're there, we're going to learn a couple things. One, how old that operation is. We're going to learn that the facility in the secret satellite base is being used for a couple different things. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to learn that we're being tracked and we need to get back to our source in London, make contact with them, and let them know that we're in danger. Likewise, we could end up in Romania. There's an excavation site. There's photos that Olivia has of this excavation site. She couldn't get too close, and she was getting chased. They've uncovered a vampire coffin there, and there's a chance that the vampire is going to be awakened inside that coffin, and all signs point to the vampire conspiracy being involved. Hence the coffin being opened. What we learn in Romania is that let's double check. We gotta cheat, but that's why we wrote everything down. We learn that the individual, if we capture an Edom operative and interrogate them, we learn that Harker is doomed, and we better go warn him. And when we do end up in London, that's where we're going to have to make contact. Now, having read it, we know that London, all signs are going to point to Harker is losing it. Harker's going to die, and in that process, deliver the Dracula Dossier to us. We know that it's a collection of documents, files, and including in it is a first edition of Dracula that has been filled up with annotations by various agents and organizations that have been attempting to track down Dracula and convert him into an asset. We know that at least 4 different groups have gone through this copy of Dracula, and we'll zoom in so you can see their notes. My players are going to use this as an in-game prop that will direct us into new story leads, and it will drive the campaign forward as we pursue these different leads and get to the bottom of the vampire conspiracy. Some of the things that we didn't talk about yet is the very nature of Dracula's conspiracy. We didn't go that deep into exactly what Operation Edom is, and we didn't talk about ways that Edom will fight back against our player characters. Some of that information is going to reveal itself over time. This is a collaborative campaign, highly improvisational, and requires buy-in from my player characters. So I don't want to make every decision now. Typically, when I make the various pyramids, etc. in the game, I only fill out one arm in advance. And I'm very excited to see this come down. So I hope that you have enjoyed this stream, this prep stream. We have a variety of NPCs, from this petroleum executive to the archaeologist, that we're going to introduce into the game. I'm excited to play with my players. And this is sort of our first look. It's our first prep scene, and I wanted to sort of give you an insight. Really what it boils down to is I wrote down my goals. What do I want my players to get out of this, and how can I help them learn the rules more efficiently? When we actually do play the game, I'm going to need to help prompt and drive my characters forward. There's going to be these different clues and these different locales around the globe. And I want to make sure that I know what those are when my players begin to use their abilities. It's a very player-driven game, but it's also a whole lot of fun. Every experience I've had in the game so far, running it with various players, has been extremely positive. And I say that wholeheartedly. If you're interested in picking up a copy of the game, I'd like to send you my link to pick up a copy of the game. So I will put it in chat. If you're watching on YouTube, it will be below the video. I hope you've enjoyed the music. The music is the Dracula Dossier, or rather, it's Dust and Mirrors, the soundtrack for the game Night's Black Agents. Also alludes to 2 different game modes. You can pick up a copy of Dust and Mirrors as well. So I'm going to drop that. This VOD will be available on Twitch for probably about 14 days. If you're watching it on YouTube, you can find it on WebDM Plays at any time. And again, thank you so much for your participation in chat and coming out and watching my prep. Really appreciate it. I'm excited for the show that is going to occur on Saturday at 5 p.m. We have phenomenal players. Obviously, a lot of people don't want to be spoiled for the things that are going to come, but that's just it. Even preparing for the game, I'm not spoiled because everything that I do is going to end up being in response to the craftiness of my players. So before we go, I'd really like to thank Pelgrane Press for providing all the assets and giving us the opportunity to prepare this game. Understand also, in full disclaimer, that this prep is the way I'm preparing for the game. Find the way that works for you. If you want to collaborate on your own Dracula Dossier campaign, you can find me on Twitter at WisePapaGrant. I will drop that URL into the chat. I'm already collaborating with multiple people on their Night's Black Agents campaigns. And before we go, I'm going to leave you with our intro video again. Also, special thanks to Kat Tobin from Pelgrane for collaborating with me on the series, Sharang Biswas for suggesting that I run the game, and Noah Lloyd for being extremely helpful facilitating the logistics of production, from making sure that we had access to the soundtrack, the documents, as well as the opportunity to provide you all with the links. Let's watch that video one more time and have an excellent evening.